Leprosy was a highly feared disease throughout the Middle Ages, and patients were often shunned by society. The dominant Christian belief in medieval Europe, specifically 11th to 14th Common Era, was that leprosy was a punishment from God for sinning. For instance, in the 9th century, the Mu'tazila questioned the hadith, using examples to demonstrate that many sayings were contradictory. To explain this, he used evidence from Almeria's second-hand shop market. This market was where the bedding and clothes of the dead patients were taken to be sold. Most of the shopkeepers at this market died from the plague, in contrast with other markets. In this case, God was believed to create unique, coinciding events that allowed for disease transmission. However, a practice known as variolation was used to protect against the deadly illness. Variolation consisted of taking a small amount of pus from a patient with mild symptoms and introducing it into small scratches on the limbs of the person being immunized. There is a set of old women who make it their business to perform the operation every autumn in the month of September when the great heat is abated. People send to one another to know if any of their family has a mind to have the smallpox. They make parties for this purpose, and when they are met, commonly 15 or 16 together, the old woman comes with a nutshell full of the matter of the best sort of smallpox and asks what vein you please to have opened. She immediately rips open that you offer to her with a large needle, which gives you no more pain than a common scratch, and puts into the vein as much matter as can lie upon the head of her needle, and after that, binds up the little wound with a hollow bit of shell, and in this manner opens 4 or 5 veins.
Caution. Watching this video may result in an irresistible urge to binge watch till the very end. Proceed at your own risk, as you might get hooked and unable to press pause. Brace yourself for a captivating journey of discovery.
Welcome back, curious minds. Today, we embark on a fascinating journey through the annals of history, uncovering the untold stories of Muslim contributions to the field of medicine. In this captivating exploration, we delve into the captivating tales of leprosy, the Black Death, and smallpox, revealing the diverse understandings and responses to infectious diseases within the vast expanse of the Muslim civilization from the 7th to the 14th century Common Era. Have you ever wondered how our ancestors grappled with the challenges posed by infectious diseases? How did different Muslim societies navigate these invisible threats, influenced not only by religion, but also by their unique social and historical contexts? Prepare to be amazed as we unravel their groundbreaking insights and innovative approaches. Join us as we bring to light the forgotten gems of Islamic medicine, often overshadowed by other historical narratives. From the captivating tales of leprosy that inspired both fear and compassion, to the devastating impact of the Black Death and the relentless battle against smallpox, we'll explore the minds of these extraordinary healers. Were the concepts of germ and miasma theories already brewing within the intellectual corridors of the Muslim world? How did religion shape their understanding of disease? And what ingenious methods did they employ to combat these invisible foes? Brace yourselves for mind-blowing revelations that will challenge your perceptions of history. So, fellow explorers of knowledge, get ready to be transported back in time, where ancient wisdom intersects with the urgency of modern health challenges. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to support our quest for knowledge. Join us on this enthralling adventure as we unravel the mysteries of history and shed light on the incredible stories of Islamic medicine. Let's dive in. Throughout history, infectious diseases have been an ever-present companion to human existence. Major outbreaks have claimed millions of lives and left a lasting impact on populations, politics, and economies. The Muslim civilization, which flourished for several hundred years and stretched from Spain to parts of China, was no stranger to infectious disease. Some describe Muslim responses to epidemics within this period as uniform and pessimistic. Unsurprisingly, across such a vast expanse of time and space, this was not the case. Scholars, physicians, and lay citizens within the Muslim world had complex and diverse ways of understanding and reacting to illness. This video takes a look at the varied responses to some of humankind's most ancient and devastating diseases. Today, we use the germ theory to understand infections. Developed throughout the 19th century, the germ theory states that infectious diseases are caused by microorganisms invading the body. Over the many centuries before this became widely accepted, however, there were various other ways of explaining the sources of disease. In early accounts from the Muslim civilization, certain epidemics were thought to be a punishment from God. The bubonic plague of Amwas, which struck invading Muslim armies in Syria, was believed to be punishment for the actions of earlier populations. However, in an act of divine mercy, Muslims who died from this plague were said to become martyrs. The accounts of the plague of Amwas were collected within hadith. In Islam, hadith are records of the sayings and guidance of Prophet Muhammad, which were recorded and passed on by chains of narrators. One of these sayings was, "If you hear of an outbreak of plague in a land, do not enter it, but if the plague breaks out in a place while you are in it, do not leave that place." Today, this guidance sounds very similar to our modern concept of quarantine or isolation if we think of COVID-19 responses. Due to the Prophet's unique status in Islam, hadith are considered highly important in religious law and guidance, second only to the Quran. The Quran is a book containing verses recited by the Prophet as words of God, Allah. The hadith are collections of sayings and descriptions of the Prophet's life, as narrated by his companions. It is important to note that the hadith chroniclers classified the narrations into categories according to the strength of their authenticity and the personalities along the chain of narrators. Prophetic traditions have been influential within the field of medicine and healthcare. Cleanliness is half of faith. This saying illustrates the significance of good hygiene in Islam. The importance of cleanliness, both physically and spiritually, for Muslims is demonstrated by the paired practices of washing and praying 5 times a day. Several other hadith are also related to preventative medical practices. These include eating a balanced diet and keeping sources of drinking water separate from toilet waste. Today, framed by the germ theory, we can understand how many of these long-held traditions were important in helping to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. In the 9th century, due to a significant translation movement, the Miasma theory of infectious diseases became dominant in Muslim civilization. This theory explained diseases as being caused by poisonous and putrid vapors, or miasmata. Miasma theory dates back to the classical Greek period and was advanced by Hippocrates. Hippocrates, often titled the father of medicine, believed that 4 bodily fluids, black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, were responsible for the makeup of each individual's unique characteristics, temperament, and health. If the balance of these humors was disturbed, this could result in illness or death. Once inhaled, miasma were believed to disrupt the humors and make the individual ill. In 9th century Baghdad, scholars from diverse backgrounds translated a vast quantity of medical work from former Greek, Indian, and Persian civilizations. From this, and from the remnants of Babylonian and Sumerian traditions, they adopted and developed several ideas, including Humoural theory. Many influential scholars and physicians, both during and after this period, for example, Al-Rāzī and Ibn Sina, drew on this work. As a result, they considered certain diseases, such as leprosy and plague, to be contagious. However, using miasma theory, they believed that these diseases were transmitted through corrupted air, rather than the transfer of microorganisms, which is our understanding of contagion today. Leprosy was a highly feared disease throughout the Middle Ages, and patients were often shunned by society. The dominant Christian belief in medieval Europe, specifically 11th to 14th Common Era, was that leprosy was a punishment from God for sinning. Sufferers were given bells and special clothing to warn others as they approached. Outside of their homes or special hospices, they were feared and ostracized. Very early on in the Muslim world, however, lepers were separated from others, but cared for and treated humanely. What is often regarded as the first recorded hospital in the Islamic world built by Caliph Walid ibn Abd al-Malik in 707 Common Era, was a leprosarium. Slightly later, Biamaristan included separate leprosy wards. Patients were treated by specialist physicians and given regular provisions, rather than being outcasts. Did you know? Hospitals in medieval Islamic civilizations were called Bimaristans. Bimaristans were incredibly well-organized institutions, often providing multiple specialized mental and physical health care services, as well as medical education. They were very similar to today's hospitals. The Al-Mansur Calawin complex in Cairo, the complex included a Biamaristan. A policy statement from its opening declares that there is no cost for treatment. Whether the people come from afar or near, whether they are residents or foreigners, strong or weak, low or high, rich or poor, employed or unemployed, blind or signed, physically or mentally ill, learned or illiterate, there are no conditions of consideration and payment. None is objected to or even indirectly hinted at for non-payment. The entire service is through the magnificence of God, the generous one. Flee from a leper as you flee from a lion. To the non-expert in hadith classification, the sayings sometimes appear contradictory. This is due to a lack of distinction between the hadith categories. For example, the Prophet advised to flee from lepers, and he refused to accept the oath of allegiance of a leper in person. However, it was also reported, in a weak narration, that he invited someone with leprosy to eat from the same bowl as him. All Muslim physicians would have been familiar with religious studies, as they would have learned to read and write using the Quran. However, the ways in which different scholars have interpreted and understood both religion and science are complex and multifaceted. Due to disagreements on the classifications or veracity of hadith, prophetic traditions have not universally been accepted by Muslim scholars across time, and many theological debates have arisen. For instance, in the 9th century, the Mutaliza questioned the hadith, using examples to demonstrate that many sayings were contradictory. This school of thought was skeptical of the growing list of supposed prophetic traditions and emphasized the importance of human reason. Others defended the hadith, arguing that they were in fact logical and compatible with observation, so long as they were read and understood within their individual contexts. This side emerged as the more influential view within Sunni Muslim scholarship. This shows us how religious literature can be interpreted in various ways. Often faith and science are assumed to be at odds with each other, but this is not always the case. In these debates, different groups of Muslim scholars used examples from the Hadith and the Quran to argue both for and against the compatibility of religion and scientific values. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic which devastated Asia, Europe, and North Africa in the mid-14th century. The plague, which recurred several times over the subsequent decades, had a fatality rate of around 30 to 60%. Following prophetic guidance to not flee the plague, the Andalusian physician and scholar Ibn Khatima al-Ansari, 1299 to 1369, remained in his city of Almeria when an outbreak of the Black Death occurred. He treated patients while observing and recording the epidemic. Al-Ansari documented all of his observations in a book entitled Tazil Garrett al-Qasid fi Tafsil al-Marid al-Wafat, the fulfillment of the inquirer's aim concerning all about the invading epidemic. He followed Miasma theory, believing that the plague was spread through putrid vapors emitted from severely ill and dying patients. To explain this, he used evidence from Almeria's second-hand shop market. This market was where the bedding and clothes of the dead patients were taken to be sold. Most of the shopkeepers at this market died from the plague, in contrast with other markets, where the death rate was lower, in line with the rest of the population. Al-Ansari attributed this to the shopkeepers inhaling vapors absorbed by the bedding that the patients had used while they were ill. He also noted that castles and other secure areas were protected from the plague until a sufferer came into close contact with the household. Al-Ansari's writings show us how observation and empirical evidence have been used throughout time to support different theories of disease. Of course, today, these findings are probably explained by infected fleas being carried on the clothes and bedding sold at the markets, and by those visiting the castles. Constant recurrences of the plague led to many treatises being written by Muslim scholars in this era. Diverse opinions and topics were demonstrated across these writings. As we have seen above, Al-Ansari focused on the contagiousness of the Black Death. Others, such as Al-Lakhmi, authored public health guides focused on preventing the spread of the disease. At a similar time further east, however, scholars such as Ibn al-Wardi and al-Manbiji disputed theories of contagion and argued that the plague was a divine punishment, which could result in martyrdom. Other authors, particularly those practicing tasawwuf, Sufism, focused on promoting the moral duty of Muslims to stay at an outbreak and care for the sick. On the topic of disease transmission, some scholars argued that diseases had their own nature, given by God, and could therefore transmit themselves between humans. The more dominant school of thought, however, was that diseases did not have their own agency and, as with all creation, were entirely dependent on the will of God. To complicate this further, those who believed that diseases were completely reliant on God could still support theories of contagion. In this case, God was believed to create unique, coinciding events that allowed for disease transmission. As we can see, religious literature was interpreted in diverse and complex ways throughout the Muslim world to support a variety of ideas about infectious diseases and science. Furthermore, religious concepts were also often combined with medical and superstitious beliefs, remedies, and objects in the treatment and prevention of disease. These included diet, bloodletting, herbal concoctions, magic, amulets, and talismans. Plague was the subject for many treatises. However, one disease that received surprisingly little scholarly attention for several centuries was smallpox. Smallpox was an ancient disease that killed 1 in 3 of those that it infected. Highly contagious, smallpox was characterized by fever, vomiting, and blistered skin pustules, pox. The disease spread across the world via trade routes and devastated many populations, until it was eradicated by vaccination in 1979. Despite its continuous prevalence and distinctive characteristics, very little was written about smallpox for hundreds of years. That was, until the renowned Muslim physician Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Rāzī wrote his influential text Kitab fi al-Jadari wal Hisaba, a treatise on smallpox and measles. Unable to find a satisfactory text already written on the subject, Al-Rāzī was the first to detail the specific differences between smallpox and measles. Before this, the two diseases were regarded as the same. Today, this is called a differential diagnosis. For example, he wrote that, though fever and breathing difficulties are common in both diseases, back pain is more prominent in smallpox, while anxiety and distress are more common in measles. The book also explored the transmission, treatment, management, and prognosis of smallpox. This treatise was extremely important. It was reprinted for over 1,000 years in many languages. The work also clearly influenced several physicians born after Al-Rāzī, for instance Ibn Sina, one of the most influential scholars of the Islamic Golden Age. One of Al-Rāzī's observations was that those who survived smallpox did not suffer from the disease again. This is the foundation for vaccination. Before the smallpox vaccine was discovered, however, a practice known as variolation was used to protect against the deadly illness. Variolation consisted of taking a small amount of pus from a patient with mild symptoms and introducing it into small scratches on the limbs of the person being immunized. This would usually result in a mild form of the disease and, upon recovery, the patient would be immune to smallpox. In some instances, however, the infection could develop into a severe case and become deadly. Furthermore, for a period of time, the patient would be a carrier of smallpox and could spread the disease to others who were not immune. There is a set of old women who make it their business to perform the operation every autumn in the month of September when the great heat is abated. People send to one another to know if any of their family has a mind to have the smallpox. They make parties for this purpose, and when they are met, commonly 15 or 16 together, the old woman comes with a nutshell full of the matter of the best sort of smallpox, and asks what vein you please to have opened. She immediately rips open that you offer to her with a large needle, which gives you no more pain than a common scratch, and puts into the vein as much matter as can lie upon the head of her needle, and after that binds up the little wound with a hollow bit of shell, and in this manner opens 4 or 5 veins. Variolation was a very old tradition. The first clear reference to the practice was made in China in 1549. It was later employed throughout Africa, Asia, Persia, and Turkey. In 1716, Lady Mary Montagu accompanied her husband when he was appointed British ambassador to Istanbul. Here she observed the practice of variolation and, impressed, had both of her children inoculated. She tried to promote the practice to the British medical establishment, but met resistance, both because she was a woman and because it was an Oriental practice. However, her efforts eventually paid off and trials began. The procedure became generally accepted in England until 1796. In 1796, building on this practice, physician Edward Jenner recognized that milkmaids who had been infected with cowpox, a disease similar to smallpox, but less serious, never caught smallpox. He then inoculated James Phipps, an 8-year-old boy, with pus from a cowpox pustule, causing a mild illness in the child. When James was then challenged with smallpox material, he did not become ill. This incredible story demonstrates how thousands of years of knowledge from across the world was brought together to produce the first ever vaccine. Thanks to this, and an international public health effort led by the World Health Organization, the ancient and devastating illness was the first, and so far only, human disease to be eradicated globally.